Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, guys, to a new episode of Teach Me Tuesday. Today, we're going to answer a very frequently asked question. It's definitely asked among first time homebuyers a lot. Like, what happens at closing? Like, what happens at closing when you go to purchase a home, and what closing costs are typically associated with buying a house? If you guys want to know the answer to that question, you guys have tuned into a great episode of Teach Me Tuesday. My name is
Right.
LaShawn Abraham. I am the sales manager down in Summerville, South Carolina. I am licensed in South Carolina and Georgia, and I'm here to serve you for all your mortgage lending needs.
Gavin
So,
Abraham,
mhm.
Summerville, South Carolina. I'm the same in the other half of Team Abraham. Perhaps some say the greater half, um,
Mm.
and then some say the finer half. But anywho,
Ah.
anywho, just excited again. Another Teach Me Tuesday, guys. We're coming to bring you some good jewels and tidbits for you guys to use and apply. In your home searches and in the process of buying a home.
Um, I'm Wilmot Berry with the Berry Group, brokered by EXP Realty here in Orangeburg, South Carolina, serving people in the surrounding areas as well. Don't be shy if you're in Columbia, Charleston, Somerville, wherever. I can still be able to assist you in those areas. So looking forward to this topic today. Talking about closing costs.
Yeah. Real quick though, we gotta give our loyal followers and fans a shout out. My boy EJ,
Happy belated birthday, Mr.
happy
Ford.
Always.
belated birthday. Birthday was yesterday, and yeah, you
Pisces
get
season.
definitely getting old. Um, but yeah, me and Wilmot, we share childhood friendship with EJ since we was yay high. So
Oh man, way back, way back. You know what I'm
well, way
saying?
back.
William J.
All right.
Clark. You know,
All right, but I don't want to make him feel too special. That's enough of live time for him. Moving on.
Pisces season. So yes, Pisces season. I agree.
All right, so LaShawn, you was jumping in.
Yep. So we're going to talk about the closing process. A lot of time I feel like people get super confused when it comes time to close on a home. They understand that, you have the beginning part when you're searching, getting pre-approved and all of that fun stuff. But once, your loan is approved and you get that final clear to close, well, what happens then? Like who's involved? I know the transaction can look a little different, but very similar whether a person is getting a mortgage loan and or if they're paying for something in cash. But generally speaking, a real estate attorney is involved no matter what. And so you're going to need a real estate attorney in order to conduct that closing, depending on the state. For us, we're licensed in South Carolina. So South Carolina is an attorney state. And so we do go to an attorney's
Mhm.
office to actually close on the transaction. So typically, what can a person expect when it's time to close as a part of their closing process? Let's kind of dive in there.
Okay. Well, I mean, you just you just posted on social media, um, you know, three closings in one day.
Mm.
Which was kudos to uh to all those who are sending referrals our way and all that good stuff. But yeah, I mean, a part of that process for those individuals when it comes to closing is, first of all, how we get there. Of course, there's documentation review. So when we're at closing, or when even when you get prior to closing, what we're required to send out to you at least 3 days prior to you closing on your loan is a closing disclosure, which we normally refer to as a CD, and it goes over. It tells you pretty much is as detailed as possible. All the loan details. It tells you what you're needing to bring to closing, as far as what money you need to bring, what your it's going to break down your loan amount. It's going to give you, um, all your fees and things that you're paying, what both sides are maybe getting back from, as far as um, netting, as far as the seller, what are they receiving, the buyer possibly, what everything that's associated on their side. So it's a lot of document review, and then once you review that document, you sign it, acknowledge that you received it. 72 hours later, you're eligible to close. Um, and like you said, LaShawn, you go to a closing attorney's office, and um, you know, prior to that, you should already know what you're bringing in closing. So you're responsible for either wiring your money for closing, or getting the cashier's check, whatever it may be that they accept. So you want to bring that with you to closing. And then I know from the real estate side, Wilmot will tell you that I guess leading up into closing, most importantly, going a final walkthrough. I'll let you speak to that, Wilmot.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's important. Why do you need a final walkthrough of the house that you know you're going to buy? There's a couple reasons. One of the reasons is, you definitely want to make sure the house is in the same condition that you saw it in the last time you saw it, before you go close it, before you go to the
What do you
closing
mean?
table.
You mean, but things change or something? Like people do
I mean,
do crazy things.
man, things can happen. You know, things can
Has a
happen.
final
You
walkthrough ever
know,
stopped the closing?
yes, yes. I've had that happen on some occasions where there were some repairs that needed to be done, right? And
Hmm.
all of the repairs wasn't done on the property, and my buyer wasn't comfortable with closing without those repairs being done. So
Mhm.
we had to push closing back, and that's rightfully so. I mean, you have that choice. So I've had it on a new construction property. This is why, guys, it's important to have an agent represent you with new construction. When you do that final walkthrough, my buyers were not happy with, the repairs that were done to the house. And we told them, hey, we won't close the day until these repairs are satisfactory to the buyer.
So
Hmm.
it was
And
new construction and they still needed repairs?
absolutely. So
Oh.
yeah. So, some people bypass that home inspection,
Mhm.
um, which is, it's the buyer's choice, but I always
So
recommend it.
that's
You
a good
know,
question. So I have a question about that because I think
Yeah.
people ask that question. So I know, like when we built the house, we did new construction as well, and so we did an initial part of the process. We kind of do that, call it a blue tape walkthrough. We went, and, walked around the house and put the blue tape everywhere of things we wanted them to fix. But we didn't opt to do a home inspection at the
Until.
beginning of the
Mhm.
process before closing. Now we opted to do a home inspection because we know the builder gives you typically at least a year warranty up front to kind of cover anything that may happen within that time. And we did our home inspection at month like 10 or 11 before our year was up. So what are your thoughts on that in regards to, even though you have a builder, but of course you have probably like what all these subcontractors or whatever that's truly building your house. So what would you say there?
well, let me say this: you're not right or wrong if you decide not to get the home inspection. Some people feel very, very confident in their builder. Okay.
Mm.
And if you trust your builder that much to the point where you wouldn't want a second set of eyes that are trained to see issues in a house that your eyes might not be accustomed to seeing, that's what I want people to understand, is that when you hire a home inspector, they have a set of eyes, they have a set of eyes trained to see issues that you probably won't see with your eye. Okay.
Mhm.
Some people look at it like they are, just mainly looking at the paint, the drywall. They're looking at the granite, the floors, but that home inspector is going to check all of those major components of the house, places you won't go, like your attic. If you have a crawl space, they're going to go in that crawl space. They're going to check that electrical. They're going to
Mhm.
make sure all of your major appliances are running properly. I mean, it's just another layer of protection that you have when you move into that house, knowing that everything should be okay when you move into that house. Okay, so That's just my 2 cents with
But
that.
that's a good point because I think a lot of times, for example, we had a closing on yesterday as well, and so one of the things that the buyer brought up at closing, as he was like right before they did their final walkthrough the day of closing, that morning before closing, and so at the time when he first saw the house, there was furniture in the house, so he had an idea of what could fit in what rooms and things like that. And so, of course, typically, after you kind of walk the house the first time, you fall in
Mhm.
love with it, you put an offer on it. I'm assuming majority of the time you really don't go back to that house again to really look at it or view it until probably it's time to close, unless they're building it and you're just going in checking in. So he hasn't been back to the house since the time he saw it the first time. So now he's seeing the house the second time on the final walkthrough with no furniture in the house anymore. And so
Mhm.
his eyes are looking like these rooms look a lot smaller, or, there's a spot here, or, the carpet ain't quite as clean as I thought it was going to be, or whatever, because the furniture and stuff is now out of the house. Now,
Mhm.
have you experienced anything like that before where, either I'll call it buyer's remorse, but you're already under contract and you agreed to buy the house, and now you go back and you're like, this don't quite look the same, or what I expected, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I've had that happen a couple times, and you know, the house does look different without furniture. So, and then also, sometimes your agent can put in a contract, especially let's say if they had tenants in the house or something
Mhm.
like that, where they have furniture and they have to move out,
Mhm.
where, some kind of contingency where, hey, we want to see the house after all furniture has been moved out, to look for any type of repairs that might need to be made that the buyer may want. So that can be put in a contract. I have done that with a client before, but it's it's not typical. I'm not gonna sit here and act like we do that every time, but I would say that it is good to have a thorough look at the house. Man, look in closets, look underneath beds. I know that might sound weird, but
Mhm.
hey, this is the house that you're invested in. I want people to understand, like, just don't get caught up in all the glitz and the glamour when you see a house. And that's why having a home inspection is important as well, man. A lot of times even the home inspector would catch certain things that you didn't catch.
All
So
right.
That's
yeah.
really good to know. I never thought about it that way, in regards to like writing that into the contract. Because like I said, typically, I mean, especially I guess depends on if the house is vacant, like you said, if there's tenants in the house or if it's new construction or whatever the case may be. There's so many different, scenarios that this can kind of play. So I think it's just super important that you work with reputable people. You have a good, a great real estate agent like yourself that, look out for the best interests of the client. So doing that whole final walkthrough is part of, the closing process. In addition to that, one things that happen is title. So there's a title search that's being done at closing. Actually, the title search is done prior to closing.
Mhm.
Um, but typically a lot of times with the title search, that sometimes, can be a little bit of a challenge too, especially in more rural areas, if there's heirs property, or sometimes we experience where there's liens that come up on the property that we have no idea, that we didn't even know about, whether it's on the seller side or against the buyer. So let's kind of talk about that and how that can impact a person's process, or how, especially if a person's either selling a house, or if they're trying to buy a house that may experience some type of, impact of a title transfer.
Yeah, I mean, so when it comes to title, I mean, nobody wants to. Well, you don't want to purchase a home without a clear title. And that's
Why?
the well, for one, you don't want anybody to come back and say that they have ownership in this home that you thought you had 100% ownership. Well, you know, at one point, this person own, either owned the home or had a stake in the home of some sort, or someone put a lien against the home because of some work that they did that they were never paid for, or the land that the home was built on was indigenous to Native Americans or whoever it may have been, and now you because you didn't do your due diligence and get a clear title search and get title insurance, because that also protects your investment, to where if there's something where you did do your due diligence and got a clear and search for a clear title, but for some reason the attorneys didn't find um, everything, or they didn't find this one thing that now pops up and someone's claiming to have ownership in this property or in this land or whatever it may be. um, you're protected for the value of that property. Not to say that you'll be able to always just stand at home, but that's the importance of title. That's the importance of making sure that at a closing, you're signing the title, and you're signing it based on showing that it's clear and free based on the search that's been done. And typically, even if title wasn't clear or free, you wouldn't get to that point of making it to the closing table. That would need to be addressed, and especially if you're financing your property, because again, us as a lender, and other lenders and banks out there, they won't give you the financing for it because we don't know if someone else can come claim this property, because we're giving you a mortgage with the understanding that you're responsible and you have full ownership of this property.
Yeah, so that's good to know. So, Wilma, I know you do a lot of listings. You sell a lot of houses in addition to assist buyers. I mean, on the selling side, I mean, do you typically recommend that a seller, somebody who wants to list and sell their home, to do a title search before they list the house? Is that typical?
Well, not necessarily get a title search before they list it. Now, if there are certain circumstances that I may ask them and say, "Hey, do you own the property outright? Okay, do
Mhm.
you have? Is there someone else that might be on this deed or title? Right?"
Mhm.
Then I will ask for further documents pertaining to the ownership of the property. Okay, let's say for instance, a widow, right? And they husband passed away, and this was recent. They haven't went through that probate process yet. You
Mhm.
Mhm.
know, something that's something that's important that people need to know about, like because that's a process that has to be done in order to sell the property. you know so it's a lot of different little legal situations that might come up, not all the time, but I hear quick claim deeds,
Mhm.
tax deeds,
Mhm.
those a lot of I learned about that the hard way because I wasn't a realtor and I didn't get a real. I thought this land was good and cheap, and I bought it and didn't realize what I was buying, and found out I had to wait a time period before I could do something with the property. Then found out that I had to do what we call a quiet title action,
Mhm.
that took additional monies and time as well. So it's important. That's one of the reasons why we step in as a realtor to kind of guide you on what direction you need to go into when it comes to these different scenarios. So
Mhm.
That's a good point. And the reason I asked, like, did you recommend, like, your sellers, people who want to list and sell their home, to get a title search? Because a lot of times on our side, on the lending side, what we end up finding out is, people get, a little bit, have selective memory, or they get a little bit of amnesia, and they forget that they, took out solar panels and they put a lien against the house,
Mhm.
or they have a second mortgage because they got some kind of down payment assistance or subsidy through like NACA or USDA Direct or something like that. So you ask them the question like, hey, do you have any other mortgages on the house, or show me the documentation, and they only can show you what they remember. Like, oh yeah, here comes my mortgage statement and this is what I owe. But Lord behold, you owe a lot more than this against the property. But you either forgot, or or maybe someone passed away or something along those lines, and now there's additional liens against the house that you was completely unaware of, and that can end up impacting the closing of that property.
Absolutely.
So yeah. So we touched on the reviewing the documentation. Gavin mentioned about getting that closing disclosure at least 3 days before closing. We talked about the transfer of title, and so let's talk about one of the biggest things, the cost, closing costs, right? I think that is a very popular question people ask, like, what are closing costs? I paid a down payment. Is down payment and closing costs the same thing? Like, what is this closing cost covering, and who pays the closing costs, or what can I expect? I think that question is so loaded and it has so many different layers to it. But in general, if one of you guys want to tackle that, just a overall, like, just definition of what are closing costs, and then I guess the other person can either address like what can a person expect to pay with closing costs.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll jump in. I mean, closing costs simply is the cost included is various fees associated with the purchase of a home, such as you have your attorney's fees, title insurance, fees to record the deed, and then you also have, like, your in your closing costs, you do bring your down payment. It's included in that. It's calculated, so whatever that it's figured in. Um, and then you have things like origination fees. The cost for a lender to originate your loan. There's a processor that looks at your loan. There's an underwriter who underwrites your loan, and those are costs associated with doing that act of business, that would be included in your closing costs. There's fees to pull your credit report, and then and also for your appraisal. Most cases, sometimes an appraisal can be paid up front to where it may not be a part of your closing costs, but how typically for us, we don't have any upfront fees for borrowers. It's all in your closing costs, so it's what you'll have to bring at the end of the transaction. Um, you know, the day of when that property becomes your property. So yeah, I mean, I think that's and then also I guess escrow fees. What escrow is it's pretty much an account that out of your monthly mortgage payment, it's calculated to where in 12-month increments, if let's say your property taxes is $1,200 per year, well, in your monthly mortgage payment, we're accounting for $100 of that monthly mortgage payment. We're holding it every time you make your monthly payment, so it adds up to the end of the year, and that's the escrow account, so that we can pay your property taxes for you. It's not something you have to worry about paying at the end of the year. And the same thing goes for a homeowner's insurance policy. We take in increments, 12-month increments, the cost for that premium, and we pay that for you when it's time to renew it again. So, yeah, all that's in a nutshell is what's included in your closing costs.
Those are a lot of things. I mean,
it is. Yes,
a lot of things
included.
you just named. So, I mean, Wilma, on your side, what do you typically see, like a range wise of how much money that is, and what alternative does the person have to try to get some of their closing costs covered or discounted in a way?
Well, I guess I try to go by I don't know if y'all heard of this or not. Correct me if I'm wrong, okay, guys. I go by the 4% rule. Okay. Like I do, so if I'm negotiating closing costs for a buyer, I take 4%. Now, unless it's really like a really cheap house,
right?
Well, let me phrase what that means.
They got some cheap houses around here.
Let's say the house is like $50,000 or below. or 60 or below, something like that, in that range. But let's say it's above $100,000 or $150,000 above. I try to go with the 4% rule, and negotiate the buyer's closing costs according to that 4% of the purchase of the agreed price on the house. Okay. So sometimes we can get them the full 4%, or even sometimes more. I think with some loans, a max incentive is 6%. I think for FHA loans, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
It just depends on what that buyer needs. We try to negotiate it with that. But also, I want to, that was something. Let me say this to my buyers out there. That was something I didn't know when I bought my house. Okay. I just thought, hey, let me ask for some closing costs. Okay. And if you buy $300,000 house and you ask for $2,000 in closing costs, I mean, you're really shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
You don't see, but I didn't know that. You was like, oh man, we're gonna get $2,000 in closing costs. Oh boy. But
they did us such they gave us such a great deal.
Oh man. But if you don't know that, you probably could have got $9,000 to $10,000 in closing costs. So I just want you guys to know about that. Definitely gonna read.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, though, of course, everything's situational, because and I'm sure you can attest to this more than anybody, as far as what does it take to win that deal. When
Absolutely.
when you're in a market where there's multiple offers, you want to be competitive, so maybe you're not going to ask for closing costs. But again, that's the whole. We've touched on that topic before, but yeah, it's good to know. Good for our listeners to know that there are options in regards to closing costs. It's negotiable. It
Absolutely.
is based
I
on.
would say it is negotiable, but I also want people to understand that it's not guaranteed. You know what I mean? Depending on exactly, I think like what you were saying, the type of market that we're in, whether it's a buyer's market or a seller's market, and that right there is also depending on inventory. Whether it's in demand or if the property's been sitting. There's a lot of different variables. So because of that, I truly, as we'll continue to probably say it over and over and over again, like I truly advise that you make sure that you're working with experts in those areas, making sure you're working with a great real estate agent, you're working with great lenders that can properly guide you, advise you, and assist you in actually making those decisions, so that you don't feel like, okay, well, I don't know what I need, or I don't know how to curb some of this cost. That's the job of, the lender, the real estate agent, to work together as a team to figure out how to make this happen for you. Because, and I guess the last little question I would ask before we wrap up is, do you find that a person can typically get closing costs, more closing costs, or closing costs in general, doing like buying a resale or pre-existing home versus new construction? Which one will kind of yield a better outcome when it comes to actual closing costs?
Well, it depends. I'm gonna say that it depends. Like, for instance, some of these builders right now are trying to get rid of inventory, right? Because of that, they're offering these incentives, like closing costs. I'm gonna pay this amount. They'll pay this amount in closing costs. Also, with resale homes, I will say this, like you guys said before, it's situational. I can almost tell, like, when I can possibly get closing costs paid for by my buyer a lot of
And I
times,
don't give away
because
all your secrets, but what's a good indicator that more than likely you can get some closing costs for your buyer on a resale home?
let me see what I got. Let's just say it's in the country, a house in the country, right? Or a house that's not necessarily been getting a lot of attention. All right. So those particular homes, sellers motivated to sell, The home might not be getting a lot of attention. There's some wiggle room there a lot of times with the seller, to possibly, get you some closing costs and maybe even a reduction in price.
Okay.
So
What
that's
about when you? I was going to ask that question. Like when you see a house price steadily going down, is that generally gives you kind of like a indication that maybe we can get some closing costs here because they keep dropping the price?
yeah, absolutely. You
Oh,
start seeing that gradual, reduction in price. That's showing that, hey man, sellers motivated. They're willing to do what it takes to sell the property. But let me also preface this too. It's solely dependent on the seller. Okay.
mhm.
Sometimes with investors, they are relentless. So they're sharks. So when I say that, they might throw that if the house is $150,000, they might throw that, I don't know, that $50,000 lowball offer in there. And which is okay, because sometimes, a lot of times, the buyer is just really trying to fill out the seller and see what he's willing to do at that point. That could do two things. It could tick the seller off,
Mhm.
or if the seller might come down a good bit, and you'll see where the seller really is with his pricing. So,
Mhm.
quick tip right there.
Well, that's some good to know. And a big shout out to Miss Tara Ori Suber. We definitely miss you. She's our transaction coordinator here with Team Abraham. She's all the way in
Mhm.
Ghana right now
Oh
doing a
wow.
missions trip
Oh
with her
man.
church. So definitely be safe. We definitely miss you and can't wait for you to return. We got a lot of work for you to do, but we can't wait for you to return. so yes. So that's all we have for you today, guys. But definitely when it comes to closing costs and it comes to the cost associated with buying a home,
Mhm.
definitely feel free to reach out to any one of us. We are more than happy to answer your questions. We're more than happy to assist you because at the end of the day, even with all the information that we're given, as you can truly see, that mortgage is not black or white. It is truly gray. It is very gray. There's not, it's not cookie cutter where there's one size fit all that, everything that, that may apply to you may apply to someone else. It is not uniformed in that way. Everybody's situation is different. Every property is different. Every market is different. As the months change and the seasons change, it all changes. So, making sure that you're working with professionals that can assist you is going to be imperative. So, if you're looking for a loan officer, if you're looking for a lender to help assist you with any of your mortgage needs, I mean, you can reach out to myself or Gavin. You can find us on all social media platforms. You can email, call, or send us a direct message. We are always here to help. And Mr. Barry, how can they find you?
Um, you can find me on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and my names on those are on Facebook is Wilmot Berry. You can find me at Wilmot Berry or the Berry Group, brokered by EXP Realty. Also on YouTube, you can find me at the Berry Group, brokered by EXP Realty. Sometimes you got to put my name in there, Wilmot Berry, as well, so my stuff will pop up. But if you want to send me an email, it's Wilmot at the Berry Group re.com, and be more than happy to help you with any questions or concerns pertaining to real estate.
All right. Mr. Abraham, you
Sure.
want to say anything before we wrap up?
Nope. It's lunchtime. I'm hungry.
Hey. All right. Well, we will catch you guys later next time. Have a good one.
All right. Peace out.
Good one.